The quantum alarms blared across the bridge of HMS Defiance, their urgent wail joining the cacophony of emergency signals flooding in from across Sector Kayla 7. Commander Arya Voss gripped the worn edges of her command chair, her weathered knuckles whitening as the tactical display before her transformed into a nightmarish tableau of destruction. "Status report," she demanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding before her eyes. Lieutenant Marco Lee's fingers danced across his console, his face illuminated by the flickering red emergency lights. "Coalition Fleet Gamma has gone dark, Commander. Delta and Epsilon fleets reporting massive casualties. The Xelan shock drones hit them simultaneously." Arya's jaw tightened. "And our shields?" "Holding at 87%. Ensign Riku Talon called from the engineering station, confusion evident in his youthful voice. "But, Commander, they didn't target us. Not directly." Arya rose from her chair, approaching the main view screen where the remnants of once proud Coalition battleships drifted like cosmic debris. "Curious," she murmured. The Defiance was an outdated human vessel with a skeleton crew, a relic from before the unified Coalition design protocols. By all accounts, it should have been the first to fall. The communications array crackled to life, and a harsh, mechanical voice echoed through the bridge. "Submit or be erased. 7 hours." "Origin," Arya snapped. "Central Xelan Command Cruiser," Lieutenant Lee confirmed, his voice grim. "They're broadcasting across all remaining Coalition channels." Arya turned to face her bridge crew, a motley assembly of species united under her command. Their faces reflected the same question that burned in her mind. Why had the Defiance alone been spared in the initial assault? "Contact Coalition High Command," she ordered. Communications Officer Tara Nix shook her head, her silver-tinged hair catching the emergency lights. "No response on any channel, Commander. Reports suggest headquarters has been compromised." Arya paced the bridge, the weight of command settling more heavily with each step. Cycle 324 of the Great Trade Era had begun with promises of peace negotiations. Now, it would be remembered as the cycle the Xelan Armada broke the Galactic Coalition with a single, devastating strike. "Plot a course through the Kayla 7 blockade zone," Arya announced, returning to her command chair. "If we're the last functional warship, then we're going to make it count." "Ma'am?" Lee questioned, his expression betraying his concern. "The blockade is impenetrable. The Xelan have layered defenses 20 ships deep." Arya's lips curved into a grim smile. "Then they won't expect one ship to charge straight through, especially not the ship they deliberately left intact." As the Defiance's engines hummed to life, Arya silently acknowledged the truth. No one dared speak aloud. They were no longer fighting to win. They were fighting to ensure that when the Coalition fell, at least one human ship had refused to go quietly. 7 hours to extinction. The countdown had begun. The officers' mess hall had transformed into an impromptu war room. Star charts and tactical displays covered every available surface as Arya addressed her assembled senior staff. 23 souls from 17 species, all that remained of the Defiance's once full complement. The Xelan Armada has deployed what we're calling shock drones, autonomous weapons platforms that somehow bypassed Coalition shield frequencies, Arya explained, projecting footage of the devastating attacks. Every modern Coalition vessel was targeted and neutralized within minutes. Yet the Defiance remains untouched. "Because we're obsolete," remarked Lieutenant Lee with a bitter chuckle. "Our outdated human shield configuration doesn't match Coalition standards." "Which gives us an advantage," Arya countered, zooming in on the blockade formation. "The Xelan aren't accounting for us. They've created a noose around Sector Kayla 7, cutting off all supply lines and communications." Dr. Selene Eric, the ship's psychologist, raised her hand. The Altarian's feathered ridges fluttered with concern. "Commander, my preliminary assessment of crew mental state shows elevated stress levels approaching combat breakdown thresholds. If we're the only ship left, We're not, Arya interrupted firmly. We can't be. But right now, we may be the only ship capable of action. She brought up a new display showing a chain of relay stations along the perimeter of the blockade. These are Xelon supply relays. Each one coordinates drone deployment for its sector. Our advantage is our size and speed. The Defiance was built for rapid strike operations, something the Coalition phased out in favor of overwhelming firepower. You want to hit the relays, Ensign Talon realized, his cybernetic eye whirring as it analyzed the tactical display. Disrupt their network. Precisely, Arya confirmed. Small teams, quick strikes. We disable enough relays. We create a blind spot in their defense grid. Lieutenant Koravex, the Defiance's tactical officer, crossed her arms. The Ceridian's scaled skin reflected the holographic light. With respect, Commander, we should be hitting them with everything we have. One massive strike at their command cruiser. And be destroyed before we get within firing range, Lee countered. The commander's approach gives us multiple chances to succeed. The debate intensified, with half the officers arguing for direct confrontation and the others supporting Arya's stealth strategy. The division wasn't surprising. Coalition training emphasized overwhelming force, while human tactical doctrine had always favored adaptability. Enough. Arya's voice cut through the argument. This isn't a democracy. The Defiance will deploy strike teams to disable the relays. Lieutenant Lee will lead the first mission. Prepare a team of 5. As the officers dispersed, Dr. Eric lingered behind. Commander, a moment? Arya nodded, her fatigue momentarily visible once the others had left. You're carrying too much, the doctor observed. The crew needs to see confidence, but you need someone to acknowledge the burden. Arya turned to the viewport, where the distant flashes of Zealand patrols illuminated the darkness. 3 years ago, I lost the Dauntless at the Battle of Vega Prime. 287 souls. I promised myself, never again. This is different, Dr. Auric said gently. The Coalition collapsed in minutes. No one could have predicted. I should have, Arya interrupted. The signs were there. The Xelon testing new drone configurations at the outer colonies. Their withdrawal from established territories. They were consolidating for this strike. The doctor's expression softened. And what would you have done differently? Arya had no answer. The silence between them spoke volumes. You can't save everyone, Arya, Dr. Auric said, using the commander's first name, a rare breach of protocol that underscored their years of service together. But this crew believes you can save them. Hold on to that. Arya nodded, straightening her uniform. 6 hours and 12 minutes until their deadline. Let's make them count. Lieutenant Marco Lee led his team through the cramped confines of the Defiance's shuttle bay. The assault craft, little more than an armored transport pod with minimal weapons, represented their best chance at approaching the relay undetected. Final checks, Lee ordered, as his team secured their equipment. Ensign Talon had joined the mission, his technical expertise essential for disabling the relay systems. Alongside them were Security Officer Drav, a hulking Brennari, whose dense musculature made human special forces look like children. Communications Specialist Nix, whose implants could intercept and decrypt Xelon transmissions, and Medical Technician Joro, a Thalasian whose regenerative abilities made him invaluable in combat situations. Shuttle Valiant prepped and ready, Talon reported, patching into the small craft systems. Stealth systems engaged, though I wouldn't bet my life on them holding up under direct scan. Then we avoid direct scans, Lee replied, checking his sidearm. In and out in 20 minutes. Commander Voss's voice came through their comms. Strike team, be advised we're detecting increased patrol activity near Relay Station 3. Adjust your approach accordingly. Acknowledged, Lee responded. We'll use the debris field from Gamma Fleet for cover. The unspoken weight of that statement hung in the air. They would be hiding among the wreckage of their allies, fragments of ships, and, undoubtedly, bodies. As the shuttle's doors sealed, Lee caught Talon staring at the deck plating, the young ensign's hands trembling slightly. "First combat mission?" he asked quietly. Talon nodded. "I was assigned to the Defiance straight from the Academy, 3 weeks ago." "Hell of a first posting," Lee acknowledged. "Focus on your task. We'll handle the rest." The shuttle detached from the Defiance, its engines barely more than a whisper as it slipped into the void. Through the viewport, Lee watched their mothership fade into the distance, a darkened silhouette against the stars, running on minimal power to avoid detection. For 15 tense minutes, they navigated through the debris field, each piece of twisted metal a somber reminder of the Coalition's devastating losses. Twice, they powered down completely as Zeelan patrols swept past, the enemy vessels seemingly oblivious to their presence. "Relay Station 3 in visual range," Nix announced, bringing up a magnified image on the shuttle's display. The Zeelan structure resembled a metallic spider, its central hub sprouting 8 long, articulated arms that pulsed with energy. "I'm detecting drone deployment pods along each arm," Talon observed. "They're launching at 7-minute intervals." Lee studied the station's rotation pattern. "We'll dock at the maintenance port during the next launch sequence. The energy surge should mask our approach." "And if it doesn't?" Drav rumbled, his deep voice vibrating through the shuttle's hull. "Then we'll have a much more exciting mission," Lee replied with grim humor. "Prepare for docking." The shuttle surged forward as the next drone deployment began, the relay's arms glowing brilliantly as they released their deadly cargo. With practiced precision, Lee guided their craft toward the station's underside, where a small maintenance airlock provided their entry point. "Docking successful," he announced as magnetic clamps secured their position. "Talon, you have 5 minutes to access their systems and upload the virus. Drav and I will secure the perimeter. Nix, maintain communication silence unless absolutely necessary. Joro, stand by for emergency medical." They moved through the airlock with practiced efficiency, the artificial gravity of the relay station pulling at their limbs after the weightlessness of the shuttle. The interior was eerily devoid of organic life. The Zeelan preferred to operate their outposts entirely through automated systems. "This way," Talon whispered, following the readings on his datapad. "Central processing node should be 2 levels up." They encountered no resistance as they moved through the station, another indication that the Zeelan had never anticipated a direct infiltration. The corridors were designed for maintenance drones, not humanoid intruders. The central processing chamber hummed with energy, its walls lined with neural processors that controlled the relay's functions. Talon immediately set to work, connecting his equipment to the main interface. "This is strange," the ensign muttered as lines of code flashed across his screen. "Their programming is adaptive, but it's following patterns I recognize from Coalition systems." "Can you disable it?" Lee pressed, keeping watch at the entrance. "Better," Talon replied, his confidence growing as his fingers flew across the interface. "I can redirect it. Make the drones target each other instead of Coalition frequencies." "Do it," Lee ordered. 3 minutes until we need to be back on the shuttle." As Talon worked, Lee's comm unit vibrated, a silent alert from the Defiance. He checked the message and felt his blood run cold. "We need to move. Now," he announced, urgency evident in his voice. "Zeelan command vessel has altered course. They're heading directly for the Defiance." 30 more seconds," Talon pleaded, the upload bar on his screen crawling toward completion. "Make it 15, Lee countered, already moving toward the exit. "Drav, prepare for emergency departure." The upload completed just as the station's alarms began to wail. Whatever Talon had done, the Zeelan systems had finally detected the intrusion. "Run!" Lee shouted, all pretense of stealth abandoned as they raced back toward the airlock. Behind them, maintenance drones began to converge, their appendages reconfiguring into weapons. They reached the shuttle with seconds to spare, Drav providing covering fire as the others scrambled aboard. The maintenance drones, never designed for combat, proved ineffective against determined organic opponents. "Detach and go dark," Lee commanded, as the airlock sealed behind them. The shuttle disengaged from the station, immediately powering down all non-essential systems to minimize their signature. Through the viewport, they watched as chaos erupted across the relay station. Drone deployment pods began launching their deadly cargo, but instead of heading outward toward Coalition territories, the drones turned on each other, creating a swarm of self-destructing machines. "It worked," Talon breathed, watching the spectacle with a mixture of awe and horror. "But they'll adapt quickly. Which is why we need to hit the next relay before they can reconfigure," Lee replied, already plotting their return course to the Defiance. This was just the beginning. As they navigated back through the debris field, a massive shadow passed overhead, the Zealand command cruiser, its hull bristling with weapons capable of vaporizing worlds. It moved with ominous purpose toward the last known position of the Defiance. Lee could only hope that Commander Voss had already moved their ship to safety. The alternative was too grim to contemplate. Commander Arya Voss watched the tactical display with intense focus as the Defiance drifted powerless through an asteroid field at the edge of Sector Kala 7. Above them, the Zealand command cruiser prowled like a predator, searching for elusive prey. "Maintain power conservation," she ordered quietly, though the command was unnecessary. Every crew member understood that a single energy spike would reveal their position. "Strike team is returning on minimal thrust," Officer Nix reported from communications. "ETA 22 minutes. Arya nodded, calculating risks and trajectories in her mind. They needed to recover the shuttle without powering up the Defiance's systems, a delicate operation under the best circumstances. Nearly impossible with a Zealand cruiser hunting them. "Deploy the gravity tethers manually," she decided. "We'll use the asteroid's rotation to mask the energy signature." As her crew moved to execute the order, Arya retreated to her ready room, a Spartan chamber that reflected her utilitarian approach to command. On her desk sat the only personal item she permitted herself, a small, holographic projector containing images of the Dauntless and its crew. She activated it briefly, the faces of those she had lost 3 years ago materializing in the dim light. "Not again," she whispered to herself, a promise more than a prayer. The door chimed, and Arya deactivated the projector before granting entry. Lieutenant Cora Vex stepped inside, her posture rigid with barely contained frustration. "Permission to speak freely, Commander." Arya gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Always, Lieutenant." "We're making a mistake," Vex stated bluntly. "These surgical strikes might create temporary disruptions, but the Zealand adapt quickly. We should be gathering any surviving coalition forces for a direct assault on their command vessel." "With what fleet?" Arya countered. "We've received no response to our distress calls. For all we know, the Defiance is the last functioning coalition warship in the sector." "Then, we should use it as it was intended," Vex insisted. "One decisive strike. The Defiance carries enough nuclear ordnance to cripple even their command cruiser." "And guarantee our destruction in the process," Arya noted. "I won't sacrifice this crew on a suicide mission, Lieutenant." Vex leaned forward, her scaled features intense in the low light. "With respect, Commander, we're all dead already. The Zealand deadline expires in 4 hours. At least this way. We choose how we go out." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth that Arya couldn't entirely dismiss. The coalition had fallen. Their mission had shifted from victory to meaningful resistance. "I understand your position, Lieutenant," Arya finally replied. "But we still have options. Lieutenant Lee's team has successfully disrupted 1 relay station. If we can hit 3 more, we create a corridor through the blockade, a chance for the Defiance to break through and reach Coalition space. And then what? Vex challenged. We'll be one ship against an armada that's already proven it can neutralize entire fleets. One ship carrying critical intelligence on how the Xelan overwhelmed our defenses, Arya countered. Information that might save what remains of the Coalition. Before Vex could respond, the ship's emergency channel activated. Commander to the bridge, Ensign Talon's voice called, urgency evident despite the low volume. Priority 1. Arya and Vex exchanged glances before rushing to the bridge, where the crew had gathered around Talon's station. The young ensign had patched into the returning shuttle's data feed. I've been analyzing the code structure from the relay station, Talon explained, displaying complex algorithms on his screen. The Xelan shock drones aren't using new technology. They're using ours. Modified Coalition encryption protocols that give them access to our shield frequencies. Impossible, Vex breathed. Those protocols are compartmentalized. No single breach could expose all fleet configurations. Unless the breach came from within, Arya realized, the implications sending a chill through her core. Someone in Coalition High Command gave them access. The betrayal was staggering in its scope, years of preparation culminating in a single, devastating strike that had brought the mighty Galactic Coalition to its knees within minutes. There's more, Talon continued. The command signals are all routing through their flagship. If we can disrupt that signal... The drones lose coordination, Arya finished, new determination flooding her veins. Lieutenant Vex, you may get your decisive strike after all. The tactical officer straightened, a predatory gleam in her eyes. Your orders, Commander? Prepare all remaining strike teams. As soon as Lee's shuttle is recovered, we launch simultaneous attacks on the 3 closest relay stations. Arya turned to the main view screen, where the massive silhouette of the Xelan command cruiser continued its search pattern. Then we take the fight directly to their doorstep. The countdown to extinction continued. But for the first time since the attack began, the crew of the Defiance allowed themselves to feel something dangerously close to hope. 3 hours later, the Defiance hovered at the edge of a radiation belt, a natural phenomenon that interfered with Xelan sensors and provided temporary refuge as Arya's crew prepared for what might be their final mission. The strike teams had returned from their relay attacks with remarkable success. 3 more stations had been compromised, creating a corridor of confusion in the Xelan blockade. Drone strikes had become erratic in those sectors, with many of the deadly machines turning against each other or simply shutting down. The command cruiser has altered course, Lieutenant Lee reported from Tactical. They're moving to compensate for the relay disruptions, exactly as predicted. Arya studied the tactical display, where the massive Xelan vessel was repositioning to strengthen the weakened section of their blockade. Status of our stealth modifications? Complete, Ensign Talon confirmed. His uniform stained with coolant fluid after hours of working in the ship's maintenance ducts. I've reconfigured our emissions to mimic background radiation. It won't fool them at close range, but it should get us within strike distance. Arya nodded, then addressed the bridge crew. This mission has 3 phases. First, we penetrate the blockade through the corridor we've created. Second, we approach the command cruiser using the radiation belt for cover. Third, we deploy Ensign Talon's signal disruptor directly to their main communications array. And if we're detected? Lieutenant Vex questioned. Then we move to Contingency Plan Omega, Arya replied gravely. Full nuclear deployment at point-blank range. The implications were clear. Plan Omega meant the destruction of the Defiance, along with its target. A suicide run that would, at best, create temporary disarray in the Xelan command structure. All hands to battle stations, Arya ordered, returning to her command chair. Initiate stealth approach. The Defiance's engines hummed to life, their output carefully modulated to blend with the ambient radiation. The ship slipped from its hiding place, advancing toward the gap in the blockade with agonizing slowness. Minutes stretched into an hour as they navigated through the corridor they had created. Twice, Zealand patrols passed within visual range, but the Defiance's modified signature kept them from triggering alarms. Entering optimal deployment range in 3 minutes, Lee announced as they closed on the command cruiser. The massive vessel loomed before them, its scale becoming apparent as they approached. The Defiance, once considered a respectable medium cruiser in the human fleet, was dwarfed by the Zealand flagship. "Prepare signal disruptor for—" Arya's order was cut short as alarms blared across the bridge. "Multiple contacts," Vex shouted. "Drifter pods approaching from stern." "Evasive maneuvers," Arya commanded. But it was too late. The drifter pods, Zealand boarding vehicles disguised as debris, had already attached themselves to the Defiance's hull. "Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, Talon reported, panic edging into his voice. "Internal sensors detecting Zealand subsumers boarding the ship." "Security teams to breached sections," Arya ordered, rising from her chair. "Lieutenant Lee, you have the bridge. Maintain course for the command cruiser. Lieutenant Vex, with me." "Commander?" Lee questioned, clearly surprised by Arya's decision to leave the bridge during such a critical moment. "The Zealand want this ship intact," Arya explained, checking her sidearm. "That means they want something on board, either information or technology. I intend to find out what before they take it." As Arya and Vex raced through the corridors toward the breach points, the ship shuddered under the impact of weapons fire. The Defiance's stealth had been compromised, and now Zelan attack craft were converging on their position. They arrived at Section 9 to find a nightmarish scene unfolding. The Zealand subsumers, biomechanical entities designed for ship infiltration, were advancing through the corridors with methodical precision. Security personnel fired desperately at the invaders, but conventional weapons seemed to have minimal effect. "Target their central processing nodes," Vex instructed the security team, pointing to the glowing cores visible beneath the subsumers' translucent carapaces. "Concentrated fire!" The tactic proved effective, as the first line of subsumers collapsed under the focused barrage. But more were pouring through the breach points, their numbers seemingly endless. "We can't hold them indefinitely," Arya realized, assessing the situation. "We need to reach the command cruiser before they overwhelm us." Her comm unit crackled to life. "Commander," Lee's voice came through, tense but controlled. "We're approaching optimal firing position, but our weapon systems are showing anomalies. The subsumers appear to be interfacing with our technology." Arya exchanged a grim look with Vex. "They're not here to destroy the Defiance. They're here to take it." "Why?" Vex questioned, firing another burst at the advancing subsumers. "What's so special about an outdated human vessel?" The answer struck Arya with sudden clarity. "Because it's human. Pre-coalition. Our systems aren't fully integrated with standard protocols." She activated her comm unit. "Talon, can you deploy the signal disruptor remotely?" "Negative, Commander," the ensign replied, the sound of combat evident in the background. "It needs to be physically attached to their communications array." Arya made her decision in an instant. "Lieutenant Vex, hold this position. I'm heading for the shuttle bay." "Commander, you can't possibly—" Vex began. "That's an order, Lieutenant." Arya cut her off. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, execute Plan Omega." Before Vex could protest further, Arya was moving, navigating through alternate routes to avoid the heaviest concentrations of subsumers. The ship's condition deteriorated around her. Emergency bulkheads sealing breached sections. Crew members engaged in desperate combat. Systems failing as the Zealand invaders systematically corrupted the Defiance's technology. She reached the shuttle bay to find it surprisingly intact. One assault craft remained, the same one Lieutenant Lee had used for the first relay strike. Arya quickly accessed the vehicle's systems, overriding safety protocols to prepare for immediate launch. "Commander, what are you doing?" Ensign Talon's voice came through her comm unit. "Finishing the mission," Arya replied, loading the signal disruptor device into the shuttle. The Defiance can't get close enough now, but a single shuttle might slip through. The disruptor needs to be manually activated, Talon warned. It's a one-way trip. I'm aware, Ensign, Arya responded, her voice steady despite the gravity of her decision. Transmit the command cruiser's communications array specifications to the shuttle's computer. As the data transfer completed, Arya sealed the shuttle's hatch and initiated the launch sequence. Through the viewport, she could see the massive form of the Zealand command cruiser growing larger as the Defiance continued its approach despite the boarding action. The shuttle bay doors opened, exposing the chaotic battlefield that space had become. Zealand attack craft swarmed around the Defiance, which returned fire with every operational weapon it had left. The distraction was perfect. No one would notice a single shuttle slipping away from the combat zone. Arya guided the small craft away from the Defiance, using debris and weapon discharges for cover as she plotted an intercept course with the command cruiser. Behind her, the ship she had commanded, the last vessel of the once proud Coalition fleet, fought on against impossible odds. Defiance actual to bridge, she transmitted. Maintain defensive operations. Draw their attention for as long as possible. Understood, Commander, Lee's voice replied, determination evident despite the static interference. May your aim be true. Arya allowed herself a moment of reflection as she piloted the shuttle toward her target. In the 3 years since losing the Dauntless, she had carried the weight of those deaths like a physical burden. Now, facing her own end, she felt strangely unburdened. One final act to give meaning to all that had been lost. The command cruiser grew in her viewport, its massive hull bristling with weapons that could vaporize her shuttle in an instant. Yet, they held their fire, perhaps confused by the small craft approaching amid the larger battle. Arya identified the communications array, a sprawling structure near the cruiser's stern that coordinated the Zealand's vast network of drones and relay stations. She adjusted her course, pushing the shuttle's engines beyond safety tolerances as she made her final approach. For the Dauntless, she whispered. For the Defiance. The shuttle collided with the communications array at full speed, its reinforced hull tearing through the delicate equipment. Arya was thrown forward against her restraints, pain lancing through her body as the craft embedded itself in the cruiser's superstructure. Through cracked viewports, she could see Zealand defense drones converging on her position. With blood-slicked fingers, she activated the signal disruptor, connecting it directly to the exposed components of the communications array. The device hummed to life, its specialized transmission overwhelming the Zealand command signals. Through the shuttle's damaged sensors, Arya watched as confusion spread through the enemy fleet. Drones stopped in mid-attack, their coordinated assault patterns dissolving into chaos. Relay stations throughout the sector began shutting down as their control signals were jammed. The command cruiser itself shuddered as systems failed throughout its massive hull. Emergency protocols activated, but without central coordination, they worked at cross purposes. Fire suppression flooding sections that weren't burning. Life support shutting down in occupied areas while maintaining atmosphere in empty ones. Arya smiled through the pain of her injuries. The Zealand had built their strategy around perfect coordination, a singular consciousness directing countless drones and vessels. Without that central control, their overwhelming force became a liability. She activated her emergency beacon, a standard Coalition distress signal that would likely go unanswered. But Arya Voss had never been one to surrender to certainty, even in her final moments. As consciousness began to fade, her thoughts returned to the Defiance and its crew. They had done the impossible, created hope where none should exist. One ship had refused to fall, and in doing so, might have given the Coalition a chance to rise again. The Defiance limped through space, its hull scarred beyond recognition after the desperate battle against the Zealand borders. Lieutenant Marco Lee stood on the bridge, surveying the damage reports with grim determination. Engines at 37% capacity, Ensign Talon reported, his young face aged by exhaustion and grief. Life support stable in remaining sections. Hull integrity compromised but manageable. Lee nodded, his attention fixed on the tactical display, where the Zealand fleet continued to drift in disarray. The command cruiser, once the heart of their assault, now floated powerless, its systems corrupted beyond recovery by Commander Voss's sacrifice. "Any response to our distress calls?" he asked, though he expected the same answer they'd received for hours. Communications Officer Nix looked up from her station, her expression transformed by disbelief. "Sir, multiple contacts approaching from Sector 12. Coalition signatures." The bridge crew froze, hardly daring to hope after all they had endured. "Confirmed," Nix continued, wonder creeping into her voice. "It's the remnants of the Perseus fleet. They've been regrouping beyond the blockade perimeter." The main view screen activated, revealing a formation of coalition vessels moving purposefully toward the Defiance's position. Though fewer in number than before the Zelan assault, they represented something precious: survival. "They're hailing us," Nix announced. "On screen," Lee ordered, straightening his torn uniform. The image shifted to show the bridge of a coalition flagship. Admiral Kento, one of the few senior officers respected across all species, regarded them with solemn dignity. "Lieutenant Lee of the HMS Defiance," the Admiral acknowledged. "We've been monitoring your transmissions. Your actions against the Zealand command structure have given us a fighting chance." "Commander Voss deserves the credit, Admiral," Lee responded. "She gave her life to disable their communications array." The Admiral nodded gravely. "Her sacrifice will not be forgotten. But the battle isn't over. The Zealand may be disorganized, but they're still dangerous. We're detecting signs that their secondary command nodes are attempting to re-establish control." "We've identified vulnerabilities in their network," Talon interjected, stepping forward. "If we can broadcast the disruption signal across all remaining coalition frequencies, we might prevent them from regaining coordination." "Can the Defiance support such a broadcast?" the Admiral questioned. Lee exchanged glances with his remaining officers before responding. "The Defiance has one final mission in her, Admiral." Over the next hours, the coalition vessels formed a defensive perimeter around the damaged human ship, as Ensign Talon and his engineering team reconfigured their communications array to amplify the disruption signal. Lieutenant Vex led strike teams to recover critical technology from disabled Zealand vessels, providing additional insights into their command structure. As preparations neared completion, Lee gathered the surviving crew in what remained of the main hangar bay. 39 souls, all that remained of the Defiance's complement after the boarding action. "You've all served with distinction beyond anything required by duty," he told them, his voice carrying across the battle-scarred chamber. "Commander Voss would be proud of each of you. When we broadcast the disruption signal, the Zelan will target this ship with everything they have left. I've arranged for evacuation to Admiral Kento's flagship before transmission begins." Murmurs of protest rose from the assembled crew. "Sir," Ensign Talon stepped forward, "the signal will require constant adjustments to prevent Zealand countermeasures. Someone needs to remain aboard." "I'm aware, Ensign," Lee replied. "I'll stay to manage the broadcast." "Not alone," Talon insisted. "I designed the modifications. I should be the one to operate them." One by one, crew members stepped forward, volunteering to remain aboard the Defiance for its final mission. Lee felt a swell of pride that threatened to overwhelm his composure. The Defiance was never the strongest ship in the fleet, he acknowledged. But Commander Voss made us believe that wasn't what mattered. She showed us that sometimes the ship that refuses to fall is the one that changes everything. In the end, a skeleton crew of 12 remained aboard as the Defiance positioned itself at the center of the coalition formation. The disruption signal powered up, broadcasting across all frequencies the Zelan had compromised. As predicted, the enemy response was immediate and devastating. Those Xenon vessels still capable of independent action converged on the Defiance, their weapons tearing into the already damaged hull. The Coalition fleet responded in kind, forming a protective barrier around the broadcasting ship. For precious minutes, the disruption signal spread throughout the sector, corrupting Xenon command protocols and preventing their scattered forces from reuniting. On the Defiance's bridge, Lieutenant Lee monitored the broadcast as the ship disintegrated around him. Systems failed one by one, emergency bulkheads sealing off sections exposed to vacuum. Signal reaching maximum dispersion, Talon reported as sparks showered from his console. Xenon countermeasures attempting to adapt, but too late. Their network is collapsing. The ship shuddered violently as another hit breached the outer hull. Warning klaxons blared across the remaining operational sections. Hull integrity at 17%, the computer announced dispassionately. Structural collapse imminent. Evacuation pods, Lee ordered, helping Talon from his station. Everyone out. That's an order. As the remaining crew rushed to the escape pods, Lee transmitted one final message to the Coalition fleet. The Defiance has completed its mission. One ship refused to fall, so we all rise. The evacuation pods launched moments before the Defiance's structural integrity failed completely. From their small viewports, the crew watched as their ship broke apart under continuous Xenon fire, its fragments scattering across the battlefield like stars. Admiral Kento's vessels retrieved the escape pods, bringing the Defiance's survivors aboard with honors rarely accorded to the crew of a single ship. In the flagship's medical bay, Lieutenant Lee found himself face to face with the Admiral. "Your transmission contained tactical data on Xenon vulnerabilities," Kento informed him. "Coalition forces throughout the galaxy are already using it to counter their attacks. What seemed like our darkest hour may yet become the turning point." Lee nodded, too exhausted for words. The victory felt hollow without Commander Voss to witness it. "There's something else," the Admiral continued, his expression softening. "We detected a Coalition emergency beacon emanating from the Xenon command cruiser before it went dark. A human signature." Lee straightened, sudden hope flaring in his chest. "Commander Voss?" "Unknown," Kento replied cautiously. "But I've authorized a recovery mission. If anyone could survive ramming a Xenon cruiser, I suspect it would be your commander." 3 days later, as Coalition forces continued to push back against the increasingly disorganized Xenon fleet, a medical transport docked with Admiral Kento's flagship. Lieutenant Lee, Lieutenant Vex, and Ensign Talon waited anxiously as the airlock cycled. When the doors finally opened, a medical team emerged, surrounding a hovering stretcher. On it lay Commander Arya Voss, battered, bandaged, but unmistakably alive. Her eyes found Lee's, and despite her injuries, she managed a weak smile. "Report, Lieutenant." "The Defiance is gone, Commander," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But her mission was completed. The Coalition stands." Arya nodded, satisfaction evident despite her pain. "One ship," she whispered, "refused to fall," her crew finished in unison. In the cycles that followed, as the Coalition rebuilt from the ashes of the Xenon assault, the story of the Defiance became legend. How a single, outdated human vessel had stood against an overwhelming enemy and changed the course of the war. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the unyielding resolve of its commander and crew. Throughout Coalition space, from the core worlds to the farthest colonies, beings of all species shared the same rallying cry that had begun aboard a doomed human ship. One ship refused to fall, so we all rise. Commander Arya Voss would go on to lead the Coalition's reformed fleet, implementing lessons learned from the Defiance's stand. Under her guidance, ship designs returned to emphasizing adaptability over standardization, and crew training focused on independent action rather than centralized command. The Xenon threat diminished as their coordinated networks failed one by one. their technological advantage neutralized by the very diversity they had sought to overwhelm. What remained of their forces retreated to the outer reaches of known space, a shadow of their former might. On the anniversary of the Defiance's final stand, Arya stood before a memorial bearing the names of those lost, not only her crew, but all who had fallen when the Zeelan struck. Her hand traced the inscription at its base, words that had spread across the galaxy in the darkest hours of the war. They broke every fleet until one human ship refused to fall.